Hey, and welcome to another daily cinephile vlog. Just sitting here in my running clothes because had to get my running. Had to watch Loki. Newest episode is out today, and gonna discuss it. Episode 2, which, of course, again, there's spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episode, I would stop it right here. But already, I feel like the show is going on the perfect track. Exactly the kind of show I've been wanting to see from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and also something that involves a subject matter that I love in all forms of media. So, again, if you haven't watched it yet, or the first episode, please just go watch the show. It's very good. And so far, I think it's going to go way farther than what WandaVision and The Falcon and Winter Soldier did, which, I like both of those shows, but I do feel like there's something about Loki that's a little more special. So, stop the video here if you have not seen it yet. Anyway, let's get into the spoilers. So, the show opens kind of where it took place before, where Loki is now joining the TVA. He's even being trained in, which is there's something funny about that idea in general. Just the idea of like Loki actually working for someone. I know in the past that he, for instance, got help from Thanos to help take over the Earth, but in this case, it's like he's got an actual office job, and he's really been taken in by the TVA because he realizes now that they may be even more powerful than the Stones themselves. In fact, he kind of knows that they're more powerful, but he just needs to actually find where the sacred timekeepers are. He needs to find them. We haven't met them yet. He hasn't gotten a meeting with them yet, but he's made it very clear that it's kind of his intention to overthrow them and take over the TVA. In fact, Mobius, played by Luke Wilson, has pretty much said as much. And I said Luke Wilson, I meant Owen Wilson. Sorry, those are just, I don't know why I always confuse their names. It should be pretty easy by now. Owen Wilson's like the one that's actually in many things. Luke Wilson is the one who was on that DC TV show, and I can't even remember the name of it now. I think it was Stargirl. But Owen Wilson plays Mobius, and he's kind of already on to Loki. Loki is saying that he's one step ahead of him, but Mobius is pretty smart and has dealt with Loki in what we see in many different capacities. There's a point where they're deciding that they're going to travel through time with Loki to go to a specific time and part of the timeline in order to catch the variant of Loki, which we haven't seen their face yet. So when they're about to leave, he actually goes through all the different Lokis that they ran into in the past, and he says no Loki is quite the same. You actually see images of the Lokis, and there's one I know that was like super muscular dude. That there was one guy who had like a beard, and there's just many different Lokis, and it kind of throws Loki off because he's like, he should be the one that knows himself the best, and yet he's still learning so many new things. We keep learning a couple more things about just what Nexus events are in general, and the fact that you can only go back so many times before it causes, or at least you can only clear the timeline so many times before it causes complete annihilation. Everything's still a little like we don't quite know exactly what happens, but it's time travel stuff. We've seen it before. If you create a paradox, if you create some kind of issue in the timeline, you can cause major destruction. In this case, the major destruction sounds more like it's just going to cause the multiverse, which seems to be the theory at the moment. This is going to cause and spark the multiverse for the rest of the film series. At one point, Loki actually goes to Pompeii because Loki is theorizing that the variant may be hiding at extremely tragic but big catastrophic events where nobody survives, because in theory, if nobody survives, then the couple minutes that lead up to the catastrophe don't really matter. If you take their supplies, if you hurt anybody, if anything is done in that moment of time, it doesn't affect the timeline because everyone in that place is going to die anyway. Something like Pompeii. Other historical events that they don't really mention as much. I was kind of wondering if they were going to go to something a little more modern, but luckily they avoid that. They're not going to get dark like that. They go back to something as far in the past as Pompeii. Loki kind of messes around with the citizens, and then, Pompeii is destroyed. And as Loki shows, it doesn't cause any variant issues. Owen Wilson is kind of funny about this too, because he goes to his, I guess, manager would be the person's name. I forget their name at the moment, but basically he goes up to his the next person in line, and he's like, Loki exposed a huge security problem with this whole timeline, and it was like, yeah, you can essentially hide and do whatever the hell you want in periods of time that happen right before catastrophic events because it doesn't affect the timeline. So they start to theorize where he possibly could show up in that timeline. Meanwhile, Loki is trying to get more information about what the TVA is in general, but he's not able to get that information. Right from the beginning, though, he is trying to screw with them. I mean, one of the big major things that happens is that in the 80s, that's where the variant was at. He was in Oshkosh, Wisconsin during a Renaissance fair. There, he attacked TVA agents. They play I Need a Hero, and I'm like, I love when they use that song. That actually kind of became a meme on YouTube for a while, where they would play that song over like battle scenes. The most popular one that I saw was the ending battle from Rise of Skywalker. No, it wasn't Rise of Skywalker. It was Last Jedi, where Kylo and Rey were like fighting all the, not the Knights of Ren. It's the other guys, the guards for Snoke. Sorry, those movies. I'm still trying to catch up with them because they've only been in my brain for a couple of years. But anyway, they use that song over that battle scene on YouTube, and it became a meme for a while, and it's very funny. You know, it was used in Shrek 2. It's been used in numerous movies during comical but memorable battles. So in this movie, since show anyway, in this episode, since it takes place during the 80s, they decide, hey, we're just gonna play this song right now, and it's comical. It works, and I thought it made sense to pull. I have it because I was like, well, they are in that time period where that song would have been popular, and they are playing it over the loudspeaker, so I guess it all makes sense to have this little cheesy moment that seems to be referencing a meme, if anything. But I guess it used to be a song that was actually used for battle sequences. Anyway, so whatever. But Loki is already trying to trick them at that point when they go to Oshkosh. Like, he's trying to explain to them that Loki's actually hiding outside. This is a trap. And it is totally something Loki would do. But like I said, Mobius is actually one step ahead of him even. It kind of becomes like this partner, buddy cop thing going on where, both are trying to one up another because both don't really trust each other. I think Loki still thinks they're just going to use him until they don't need him anymore. Meanwhile, Mobius thinks that Loki is going to try to do anything to escape, which is pretty much true. So one of the interesting things that happens is they go through the history of time of different events that he possibly could show up at. Meanwhile, Loki is also theorizing about where does it all end? Do the timekeepers know? And even Mobius doesn't know exactly where it all ends, and it's getting very existential about like what's the point of all of this. Is there like, where does this all lead to? Do our actions really matter? Do we have free will? Are we the only ones with free will? A lot of interesting conversations in general that I'm happy to see something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe tackle very well. I've seen some comments online that since they introduced the Infinity Stones in the last episode and kind of made them pointless outside of the timeline, in the TVA world, they are the all-powerful beings, and everything else in the real world doesn't really matter. Things like stones, things like magic. Some people have said, well, it kind of makes it feel like everything in the cinematic universe has been pointless, and then that makes it seem like the characters don't really have a choice in things. I have to kind of disagree there, just because I feel like this is meant to be on another level that's just kind of outside of everything else that's being done in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think it's very apparent that this is meant to be outside of it, even though it's probably going to lead to the multiverse or some kind of ramifications for the actual timeline. But I don't think that means that, outside what we're watching, or I mean, in the inside of the cinematic universe, as far as all the narratives go and character choices and such, I don't think that makes them pointless. I still think they matter. Because they're contained within their own films. It's kind of like watching something that's in a way meta, where this is just kind of, it's almost like it's referencing the Marvel Cinematic Universe as if it's like a movie series that exists and this new show is like discussing it. It's not quite like that, but it feels kind of like something that's breaking the fourth wall, about as meta as I've seen the Marvel Cinematic Universe get. And I don't think it's meant to purposely make the other movies in the past three phases pointless. I don't think that's what it's doing at all, and I don't think it's even explicitly saying that. I just think it's meant to be like, it's almost like a godlike power that's up here, where it's kind of that whole notion of, do we have free will? Do we have our choices? It's like God tells us that we do. The literature says that we do, in most religions, that you make your own choices and you decide if you're gonna atone for them or not. But meanwhile, there's a god upstairs who apparently knows everything and everything that's going to happen always. So it's like where, it kind of falls into that argument. And I think Loki's kind of the one who's trying to fight that notion, trying to figure out what the real truth is. Because I don't think he buys into the whole, as he keeps calling them, the three lizard gods. He's not buying into it. And I don't know if I'm really buying into it either. I think there is something a little off about it. Like I said, the show, I said it had like a 70s aesthetic. It's more like the late 60s aesthetic anyways, but in that time period, the whole show has an aesthetic like that, especially in the offices. And it almost makes me wonder if this, as far as the timeline goes, was actually established at some point by someone who was like in the 60s or 70s. And for whatever reason it was established, it was meant to be this like super important thing that never became known in the public, public perception of things, and yet they're still there and so-called manipulating everything. But I almost wonder if it's going to be some kind of ending like, like The World's End by Edgar Wright, where you get to the end and the godlike being just finally gives up because he realizes that humans are just going to keep acting the way they want anyways, or humanity, or I guess the whole universe is just going to keep acting the way they want, so let's leave them to their own devices, and I'm just done. I wonder if it's going to be an ending like that, or if the lizard people, the timekeepers, actually have some other motivation that's going to be dark. But anyway, Loki is still trying to go back and forth with if he's trusting them or not, if he's going to help them, if he's going to try to escape. And at this point in the show, they actually go to the future, to a different catastrophic event that happened in the year 2050 in Alabama, a hurricane. It's kind of interesting. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, besides the time jump they did to 2023, which isn't that far away. I mean, with the pandemic holding off a lot of these movies and shows, we're already almost catching up to 2023. I feel like by the time there's another Avengers movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline, I feel like it will be 2023. So it almost timed out perfectly. But in this show, for it to jump to 2050 and to start predicting how things are going to look, luckily they're not going to like some city like Back to the Future Part 2 and going crazy with their predictions and just living it up, like laughing about it and making funny jokes, because I'm not saying that the Marvel Cinematic Universe could last that long, but let's just say I have more hope in this franchise than any other franchise to last that long. If James Bond can last so long, why can't the Marvel Cinematic Universe? So making any predictions about 2050 will automatically be discredited by the time you actually get to 2050 with this film series. But then again, I guess you could just chalk it up to just being multiverse crap. And, if the multiverse does break, you could just say, well, that's from a different universe. So the 2050 in the real world could still look like how it will in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the way we made it look like in that show Loki from 2021 doesn't count because it's a different universe. I guess you could say that. But I've just never seen the Marvel Cinematic Universe do this before, where they actually jump into the future. But like I said, we don't see like advanced tech. It's just taking place at a supermarket because that's where a lot of people are hiding. But they also know all those people are going to die. So they assume that the variant is going to show up there. But of course, it is a trap. As Loki predicted at a different point, even though he was just trying to escape, he did prove that it was a trap. But he finally gets a look at the variant, and what do you know? It's actually a lady. At least it looks like a lady. It's a Lady Loki. Lady Loki is a character from the comics. From what I've understood about it, I'm probably getting this all wrong, but I know that Loki is a shapeshifter, and at one point in the comics, they made it where Loki was actually a woman, or at least looked like a woman. And I almost wonder if the show is... Because I was kind of thinking that the variant was actually just a future version of Loki, and that this current version of Loki, who just left, like, the ending of Avengers and got caught by the variants. I was by the TVA, I meant. I was wondering if that Loki eventually does escape, and then like further down the timeline he shapeshifts or becomes something different, but is still Loki. But now that they introduced this character, it makes me wonder if that's just a different character from a different universe altogether, as I think the show is trying to present it all along. But now it's a lady. And people were speculating before that it was going to be Lady Loki. There's other people online that, because the character's name was different in a different country for the credits, I forgot what the article said exactly, but basically they are thinking that it's possibly not actually her. It's actually meant to throw off the audience, and that it may still just be a different character entirely who's tricking Loki. But Loki can shapeshift, and can shapeshift into what looks like a woman. So I guess, it could just be another variant of him, and this could be the introduction of Lady Loki. But who really knows? It was kind of an interesting idea. It wasn't really much of a twist because I had already heard about it, but I guess if it turns out to not actually be Lady Loki, then that would even be more interesting. At the end, though, Loki does escape with Lady Loki, or to wherever they end up going. They go through one of the portals, and that's where the episode ends. So as of right now, yeah, Loki just, can't really be trusted still, even though he saw his entire future, even though it seemed like he was going to bring himself to the TVA. It seems like he still just wants to overthrow the TVA. And it seemed like an early episode to have him escape from the TVA agents, but then again, the series is only going to be 6 episodes, so it's like we're already at the first third of the show, so it makes sense that I guess things are already picking up for him escaping and what's going to happen next, and if they'll eventually try to take down the 3 lizard gods, and if this ends up breaking the entire universe. That's my speculation right now, but overall, I really have no guesses for what's next because I think the show is just that interesting. We finally get to see some time jumping. I love time travel movies, so this is exactly the kind of thing I like to watch, in any kind of medium. And to see it done in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is just wonderful. I mean, it was kind of an endgame, but not to the kind of it was not the kind of time travel that I'm used to. This is much more, my style of time travel, jumping all over the place, going very far back in time, uh, making some humor about it, but also doing it for things that really pertain to the plot. So, very interested. I'm very into the show so far, and I'm sure I'm forgetting something as far as this episode goes that I didn't mention during this vlog. But like I said, it's very focused on its main premise right now, but there's also just so much detail with it all, and I dig it. It makes me want to like rewatch the episode. I watched the first episode twice, so I almost want to watch this episode again, and maybe do that for all of these because that's just how into it I am. Just even the production design and the filmmaking choices. I really dig it. It feels very unique from previous Marvel Cinematic Universe entries. In the same way that WandaVision was unique, but I actually feel like this one might be able to pull off what they're trying to achieve all the way through. So, we'll find out. But in the meantime, that was Loki episode 2. I really dig it. And let me know your thoughts. And thanks for watching.